Welcome to Wisdom Talk Radio, a collaborative community of explorers in conscious living.
What are higher states of consciousness? Are they just for the select few who devote years of study and focus? Or what's enlightenment? And how do you shift states of consciousness? Today, we'll explore those questions and more, and how they relate to living a more joyful and more peaceful life. So stay tuned for my conversation with today's guest on Wisdom Talk Radio. I'm Laurie Seymour, host of Wisdom Talk Radio and CEO and founder of the Baca Institute. Head there to discover your quantum connection with your inner guidance by taking the Quantum Connection Quiz. In fact, we are each designed to connect with Source differently. It's just in our makeup. And knowing your own style is the first step of being able to connect more deeply with Source than you ever thought possible. It's the secret to living abundant flow and having that abundant flow in your business and your personal life. My guest today is Jonathan Robinson. He is a New York Times bestselling author and co-host of the popular podcast, Awareness Explorers. He has made a career out of getting to know the greatest spiritual leaders of our time. From Oprah to Adyashanti, he has interviewed over 100 notable people to get their take on how to live a happy, peaceful, and meaningful life. So you know why I am welcoming him today to Wisdom Talk Radio. He fits right in, doesn't he? Welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you, Laurie. I'm looking forward to this.
Great. So I actually want to say one more piece about your bio, which I didn't get to read, because I just got so excited to want to welcome you. In your latest book, The Enlightenment Project, How I Went from Depressed to Blessed, and You Can Too, you share stories of what you learned from encounters with people such as the Dalai Lama, Byron Katie, Deepak Chopra, and the late Mother Teresa and Ram Dass, as well as the powerful methods that have helped you out of your own depression and into lasting inner peace. So I know you'll also have some wonderful stories for us.
Yeah.
So just to kind of set the stage for us, what was your initial draw to exploring something as profound sounding? Because we all have our associations with the word, with enlightenment.
Well, I think like a lot of spiritual seekers, there was some pain. I had a very challenging childhood. My family was very dysfunctional. And so I was very depressed and even suicidal by age 12. And I said, well, before trying to kill myself, I might as well try some other things.
But you thought that at 12?
Yeah,
Okay. I think that's wonderful. I love it.
So, I first turned to self-help books, and that eventually got me into things like hypnosis and meditation. I kid that I kind of had my midlife crisis at age 12. So, got into meditation, hypnosis, psychedelics, and really just trying anything that might be helpful. I became a psychotherapist. And then I saw, well, really the happiest people are the people who are most enlightened. So I got interested in what that is and how I might become more like that. Because I think, a lot of people have had moments of experiences where they go, wow, there's more than meets the eye going on. The question is, how do you tap into that without things like drugs or, bizarre experiences?
Yeah. Interesting. I mean, because I also was a psychotherapist, drawn to it because I was so interested in what our potential was, what was possible. And while, there was certainly pain, it was from that sense of, I know there's more. There's got to be, like you said, there's got to be other ways to deal with this.
Yeah.
Whatever this is.
I was lucky in that I met a guru, American guru, when I was 20. And after a couple months of studying with him, he said, why don't you, look in my left eye for 3 seconds? So I did. next thing I know, I am one with the universe.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, do you live in this state? And he said, well, I don't drive around in this state, but if I'm not driving heavy machinery, this is how I live. And
Mm-hmm.
I said, wow, I didn't know that that was possible. And
Yeah.
I ended up studying with him for over 20 years.
Oh, we do have similar stories. Mine was finding it's certainly not somebody that would ever have called herself a guru. And if she had, I wouldn't have been there, probably. Just
Right.
my own, my own thing.
Yeah.
But it was in an energetic experience with her in a transmission and really an initiation that I experienced the kind of love, self-love that I had never experienced before and that I had been longing to experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And, those experiences are not that far away if you have the right idea or the right method, or you let go of the wrong idea or the wrong method.
Yeah, for me, one of the things that I had to shift, or that no, not that I had to shift, but that I did shift, or that did just shift, was going from being a seeker to living.
Hmm.
It's like I at some point I remember writing something about I gave up seeking at that point because I felt like I had come to something, and was learning and continue to learn more about how to live in that way. So I didn't
Hmm.
have to keep looking outside. It was very much more of an inner journey and a searching, not even searching inside, just getting to know, oh, what is this new life?
Yeah. And integrating higher consciousness into one's life and relationships and job and money, those
Hmm.
are all big curriculums. And, in the Enlightenment Project book, I try to talk about how teachers I met did that and how I tried to do that, because there's not a lot written about that aspect of enlightenment.
Right,
It's
right,
like, oh, once you have enlightenment, you're done and everything works out great. Well, that's
right.
not the case.
And it's not about it being that case either.
Hmm.
My excitement is in working with people and taking somebody has a great idea, they're inspired, they feel that sense of whatever it is, whether it's incredible connection or connections is simply with, I know I'm to do this in the world, whatever this is.
Hmm.
And how do you then stay connected with that and work in the world, do it in the world, go all the way from idea to revenue, and each step along the way can have that same kind of inspiration, that same kind of connection with source, with inner guidance, with the undifferentiated field, whatever system we seek to describe it by.
Yeah. One of the unique things about my story, besides the dogged persistence of interviewing
We
100
definitely,
people,
yes, yes.
um, and being depressed when I started, was that I've been able to take what I've learned in meditation or through guidance and
Mhm.
manifest it in the world.
Yeah.
So, I've made a bunch of money selling books and videos
Mhm.
and being on Oprah and the Today Show and Tonight Show and all that, blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
Because I think we're really to shine our light in a way that's helpful to people. So now I spend a fair amount of my time in prisons teaching meditation to prisoners,
Ah.
uh, because I have that track record and I get to do things like
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of people forget that part of this journey is you're trying to find peace and love inside yourself, not so that you can become a selfish human being or feel better, but so you can better serve the world. And finding that balance sometimes is tricky.
Mhm. I think it's a beautiful statement, really. It's not, it ends up not being self-serving at all. Of
Yeah.
course it is, and it does, but that it's that connection to the bigger picture.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, one of the things I've learned is how to get help with blind spots, for example.
Hmm.
Uh, because you can maybe find peace inside yourself but still be somewhat of a jerk to the people around you. That's no good.
Right. I
you
have
know
seen that and
yeah.
experienced that, and I've experienced it in myself.
Yeah. Well,
And I can be a jerk.
I lived with like 15 people for 15 years,
Mm-hmm.
and the teacher would every now and then put somebody on the hot seat and tell them how they had been kind of unconscious or a jerk in the last month.
Mm-hmm.
And, if he was talking about my friend Joe, he'd say, if you think everything I said about Joe was true, raise your hand. And we all lived with Joe, so we knew, yeah, that was true.
Yeah.
And he was very accurate about everybody's blind spots except for mine, in which case everything he said seemed like total distortion and misunderstanding. And then he'd say, if you think Jonathan is really like that, raise your hand. Everybody would raise their hand. I'd like, oh my God, I don't know myself.
Right.
So I think, asking your friends or people or your mate or your parents about what they see as your blind spots can be very humbling and very helpful.
It can. That happened this weekend. I was with some friends, visiting some friends, and it was a couple, and the woman said something about her husband. And I said, yeah, well, that could have been me. You could have said the same thing about me. And she was like, oh, you have insight. Well, yeah.
Hopefully, yeah.
But being in community in one way or another doesn't mean you have to live with somebody full time, but being exposed to, oh, let me look through another's eyes. And the foibles of the personality are quick to surface. And we would see that a lot because there were a group of about 50 of us that spent 18 years doing our own inner research and coming together periodically. And, those things by their very nature get tapped into, get triggered, whatever we want to call it, when we're in contact with another. It's very different to be self-aware when you're alone and when you're with others.
Right. And, hopefully people have relationships with people where they can say, hey, if you see me do something off or a blind spot, let me know. And then hopefully you know how to deal with the triggering. That's
right. So talk about that. So, about how to deal with that triggering.
Well, I think everybody should have some method that they can go to that helps them with that. In the Enlightenment Project, I talk about 3 or 4 different methods, something called the Sedona method, something called the love method, and these are all very simple ways of looking at your conditioning, your triggers, and hopefully letting them go. Because the problem isn't being triggered. The problem is that we carry it around for days, hours, or months sometimes. And that interferes with our natural state, which I think is more of love and peace.
My experience too with that is that as long as we're doing that, we don't get to tap into what's new. We don't get to tap into that unknown aspect of life, that unknown aspect of the quantum field. We're only repeating or bringing in what we already know.
Yeah, in this moment we are these boundless beings of energy, but if your mind is ruminating about what your mate should have said or didn't say, or your latest problem, an analogy I use for people who are watching you, this white piece of paper has a little black dot on it. And that's kind of like your biggest problem, whatever that is currently going through your head.
Okay.
Well, we have a relationship with that black dot. And most of us, our relationship is our eyeballs like glued to the black dot. And we say, oh, it's black. It's nothing but darkness as far as I can see, But if you move away, you get some perspective and you see a little black dot on a big piece of paper.
On a large piece of paper, yes.
And our lives are like on a big screen of awareness. And as you tap into awareness, you feel more peaceful and more loving.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. So one of the things that you talk about in your book is about conscious relationships or enlightened relationships. And can you kind of move into that and bring that into this conversation that we're just talking about right now?
Yeah. Many years ago, I wrote a book called Communication Miracles for Couples, and it, became a New York Times bestseller after an Oprah appearance. So I got to see a lot of bad relationships in my psychotherapy practice, a lot of,
yes.
And I said, what does conscious relationship look like? And to tell you the truth, I don't always live up to who I want to be that way. But what I see is it involves, good communication, taking responsibility for your part in stressful situations. It involves being as kind and loving as possible. That there's a lot of best practices, but Ram Dass, who is a friend of mine, used to say relationships are like the new form of yoga because they bring up all the stuff that's unlike love.
Right.
And if you want to see all your obstacles, he said love's our normal nature. If you want to see all the obstacles in the way of love, be in relationships so you can hopefully let them go.
Yeah. And I love that because whether it's an intimate partner or your sibling or your child or, just your friend, that same is true. If you're there really in relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. And, we need more guidance about how to integrate these higher consciousness ideas and experiences into daily life, into our work life. We don't spend our life on a meditation cushion where when we meditate, it's to hopefully bring some of that perspective, that clarity into all the other aspects of our life. But, Americans are people are very compartmentalized.
Yes.
Yes. An hour meditating or an hour in church, but that's not ideal, of course.
No, my teacher spent 18 years doing Buddhist insight meditation. And her experience and what totally changed her life was she was changing so rapidly from year to year to year. But each year she'd go back and there would often be similar people. And she would hear people talk about the same issues.
Yeah.
And it was so puzzling to her, like, what is going on that they're staying in the place of repeating the old patterns, but I'm opening up into all this that's new.
Yeah.
And that took her into a new place of exploring what her gift was and what she was about.
Well, one part of spirituality is opening up to new energies, opening up to more love and peace. But another part of it, which isn't talked about as much, is seeing the obstacles in the way of you having that in your day-to-day life. And that goes on, even for people who find a lot of peace, they still have all that conditioning there.
Right.
And knowing how to deal with that effectively is a really big part of our journey.
Sure. Is it how to be in the present moment? But it's so much more than that phrase implies.
Yeah. Well, how to, when you're pissed off or angry or blaming your mate, how to make use of that for part of your enlightenment journey, how to make your life your curriculum.
Exactly. And how to then look at when you're in the middle of judgment and saying, oops, oh, here I am. Here's the judge again.
Yeah. I find I like methods that take under a minute to do. And so in the book, the Enlightenment Project, I probably have 30 of those methods. But, I noticed that judgment is a big thing. I have a very judgmental mind. And so I came up with certain phrases that are really helpful that turn my judgment into compassion. Like, somebody cut me off on the freeway the other day and narrowly missed me by an inch and almost caused a multiple pileup. And at first it was like, when you're an asshole, like that. And the way they were weaving in and out of cars at like 90 miles an hour, I thought they're going to kill somebody.
Yeah, they're rife for judgment.
They definitely. Thank you. I agree. No. So
we can talk about agreement next.
Yeah, right. But what I do when I see something like that is I use a phrase a couple phrases. One might be, how are they like, how have I been like them? How have I done something like what they're doing? Like being in a big rush, that can happen. Or I'll say, it must be hard being them. Anybody living like that probably is having a terrible experience of life, and that evokes compassion. So these little techniques, these little phrases I find help me when I lose peace or a feeling of connection, help me get back there.
Yeah. Oh, that's lovely. Thank you. So I think another baseline piece that we might bring in here is, what do you now think enlightenment is? And how has that changed as you've done all of these interviews?
Well, I used to think of it as like some experience that almost made you like a perfect human being in every area of life and went on forever. Now that I know a lot of these teachers, I know that, they have problems. It doesn't change, it doesn't eliminate problems. And some of them are not very good in relationships because they haven't focused on that area. But what it does instill is a deep amount of peace in people, and usually a deep amount of love and compassion. But that doesn't mean it solves all your life's problems forever. And people can go in and out of those states. So it's not always like you're enlightened every single moment. But I liked Adyashanti's definition. He said enlightenment is perceiving the world without the lens of the ego.
Yes. Okay.
And, I think you and I have that experience sometimes. The question is, how can you have it more of the time? And how can you do it when you're arguing with your mate or dealing with email? And those are important subjects to figure out how you can do that.
They are. And I want to add a piece to that of, it's also important in how you run your business and how you even consider your business, and that it's possible. I want to take away the myth that, enlightenment is not for business or inner guidance is not for business.
Yeah.
Because as we connect in with those deeper dimensions and those higher frequencies, we get to bring them into the physical world, because the whole thing is, how do we live here in this physical body, in this physical world, and do it in a way that is of a higher frequency.
I've had a few successful books and other projects, and people ask me, what business advice or whatever they might suggest. And I say, well, each day when I meditate, I ask, how can I be of greater service? And sometimes I've been like almost dictated certain book ideas or projects, and those did the best. So, I think that is a way to not only make money, but to perhaps put what is your unique gift into the world.
Beautiful. Oh, I so celebrate that. Thank you for bringing that up, because that's what's possible. I think that is how we are designed to work. That's my experience, and that's the research that I've done over these last couple of decades. And there's so much that's possible that we don't understand. And that's okay. Maybe we don't need to understand, but we need to experiment with how to do that.
Well, I will explain everything in one term for you. Okay. So, how like iPhones work, or how planes work, or how computers work, any of that, and how the human body does a million things at once.
Right.
It all works through this thing called PFM. Have you heard of PFM?
I know you're going to tell me.
I will. PFM stands for pure friggin' magic.
There we go.
When you get right down to it, that's what makes everything work.
And it's capital M magic. It's not a little hocus pocus magic. Yeah.
But our minds think they know how everything goes.
Yeah.
And, we label things and come up with explanations, but really there's a whole world outside of words. There's a whole world outside of our beliefs. And part of spirituality is kind of putting that belief chattering mind on a shelf on snooze for a while, while you enter into the magic and miracle of reality in the cosmos.
Yeah. And we can use our own physical bodies to experience those things. I mean, I think that the body has an incredible discernment ability, a discernment for what's truth, what's not, I don't want to say what's real, what is possible, and the receiving of, or the activation of new parts of our own energy system allow us to, that bigger picture, that bigger way of being able to connect. And So
Well, let me
could we,
just comment on that. You
sure.
know, in the 90s, I edited a book where I interviewed a lot of spiritual teachers like, Mother Teresa and the Dalai Lama, etc. And I asked them, what do you think is the best way to connect with God?
Mm-hmm.
And people had answers like mantra meditation and nature and other things, psychedelics, other things. And now on my podcast, Awareness Explorers, I also ask people that question.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been a huge change in how people answer that question in the
Wow.
last 25 years.
How would you characterize that?
Well, the one that stands out the most is that in 1993, when I asked 40 spiritual teachers how best to connect with God, not a single one mentioned the human body.
Aha.
And now I would say that's the most common answer. Something
Wow.
about, listening to your body or body scans or various things. And I think that's a real evolution in our cultural, spiritual ideas.
Right, right.
The body's present. It does know a lot. You can listen to what it has to say. And by letting out some of the knots due to trauma and other things and tension, you can enter into a peaceful, more aware experience of life.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And it does take going beyond the trauma, going beyond the old patterns. I'll just put it that way. It may not be trauma, but it's whatever old patterns that we carry around with us.
Yeah.
So could we, when we're speaking about enlightenment, could we just as easily speak about the inner voice and connecting with the presence within, rather than enlightenment and awakening? I mean, what do you think about all that?
Well, you know how the Eskimos, they say they have 50 names for snow.
Mm-hmm.
Or we have one name for love, but in other cultures they have 10, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So since this culture, Western culture, is not that focused on higher consciousness, they have like one name for it. But in reality, there's different types of enlightenment. There's different levels of enlightenment. I go into that a little bit in the Enlightenment Project book, and I describe them. And none is necessarily better than other. They all have an element of peace in them, but some of them include powers like the ability to hear guidance, and some of them are not that way. Some of them really work well in the world, and others you better only do it in a cave because it's going to make you useless.
Okay.
So, but I think the important thing is that rather than define what it is, because it's really, love is more than one thing. Loving pizza is different than loving your mate and loving your child. But it's good to have more knowledge about what the whole spectrum is like, and maybe what part of the spectrum you would like to explore.
And does it sounds quite, what do I want to say, deliberate. There's a deliberateness in the way that you, I think, approach this. Well,
it can be. Our view of enlightenment is like, it just happens to some people and there's not much you can do about it. And I found that really was not the case.
Yes.
That usually the people who are using some specific tool deliberately are the ones who have the most success. Now, there are the Eckhart Tolles in the world who, are sitting around depressed and then lightning hits them and they're enlightened. But they're the exception. There's only like 3 of those people on earth.
By last count.
Yeah, right.
But there's spiritual awakenings, we know that, and you even speak about that in the book about, Kundalini awakening, or it doesn't have to be related to Kundalini, but the experience of some kind of a quantum leap. I'm more comfortable calling it that. When someone says really like, oh, it feels like I woke up.
And that is something that is happening to a lot of people nowadays. And sometimes with the right method can happen in an hour.
Yes.
And that was a big surprise to the people studying this. They thought it took 20 years of meditation, but every now and then there would be people where the right method and the right person hit, and in an hour, their whole identity shifts like, I am this awareness, and they
Yeah,
have more
yeah.
peace, and that's exciting.
And I get to experience that a lot with people, if people
Mhm.
shifting very quickly and maintaining that, or
Yeah,
then teaching them how to maintain that, because it's not a static thing.
right.
And that's part of the whole beauty of that. But why do you think that we're seeing that more, that kind of awakening, that kind of a much more quicker um, coming to something, opening?
Mhm. Well, I don't know, but I think two things might be responsible. One is that the methods for awakening keep getting better. A lot of
Mhm.
people are using methods that are 2,000 years old,
Mhm, mhm.
like certain meditations or prayers, but nobody's using a computer that's even 30 years old.
Right, right.
And the methods are getting better. My favorite methods were invented last year, just like my iPhone was invented last year, this
Okay.
model. So that's part of it. And I think also the world needs it,
Yeah.
like there's some sense that in a time of emergency, more people need to wake up or we'll end this experiment.
And that seems to be, I mean, I hear that from a number of people, that the need is here. The, well, the age of Aquarius, that this is a cyclical time where we're both being having things unearthed that are needing to be explored, are needing to be looked at, or needing to be cleared up,
Yeah.
or cleared away,
Hmm.
and that the assistance is more prevalent.
Yeah, and the intention, when people finally say, okay, I've done the material world thing, that got me
Mhm.
so far. I'm not going to be able to, I have a magnet on my refrigerator, a quote from the Buddha. And he said, do not look for peace in the world. You will not find it there. Peace
Mhm.
is within.
Mhm.
I think a lot of people are realizing, we're not going to make this world, you know, just the way we want. It's always
Mhm.
going to be a crap show,
Yeah. Yeah.
to some extent. But peace is within us. And if you have the intention, then, okay, I'm going to let go of 10% of my pursuit of money and making the world perfect. I'm going to invest that in finding the lasting peace within myself. Once you get to that level, which is not that many people,
Mhm.
then you start to say, oh, what's out there, what's new that's really working for people.
Yeah. And so you really shift your perspective, and you shift your focus. So
Yeah,
you're not focusing on what's wrong. You're highlighting, oh, what's working.
yeah, especially within myself. and
Mhm.
and even when global warming and terrorism and all those things, you can still have peace in this moment if you
Mhm.
know how to find that. And most people have not spent a lot of time outside their dogma really saying, okay, I'm going to try this, does that work for me? No, that didn't work. Okay, I'm going to try this, does that work for me? Because I know of 100 spiritual methods,
Mhm.
and almost all the people I know are using ones that science are showing are totally ineffective.
Interesting.
Like
Okay.
the least effective method
Uh-huh.
found for leading to enlightenment, according to the people researching it, is
Uh-huh.
hatha yoga.
Oh.
Now, I have nothing against hatha yoga. I do
Uh-huh.
some yoga. It's just not an effective way to find enlightenment.
But then, so I'd be curious to see, how are they looking at enlightenment? What's their definition? How are they researching it? Do they
Yeah.
have the control groups? And because I just came from this weekend with friends, and he's a research scientist. So,
And that is what they're doing. They're putting people in brainwave machines or
Mhm.
taking all these instruments or saying, oh, now we know what the brainwaves of enlightened people look like.
Right, right.
And if people do this method, 10% get that brainwave. And if
Uh-huh.
people do this method, no one has ever gotten that brainwave.
It may be a step on your own journey, and that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's an interesting thing. So you have focused a lot on methods, on techniques, on things that you say work and don't work. Can you
Mhm.
speak to some of the things that you have seen and experienced as opening up more doors more easily?
Yeah. And of course, on my podcast, Awareness Explorers, I go more into depth.
Mhm.
But let me give just two or three really quick
Sure.
ones. One of them is I made a list of everybody in my life who I've ever loved or appreciated,
Mhm.
which was about 50 people.
Okay.
Even if old girlfriends, I may have had falling out. One time I loved them.
Uh-huh.
So I make that list and I spend a minute thinking about what I loved and appreciated about each one.
Mm.
And you do that for 50 people, you're like bathed in love for an
Mhm.
hour.
Mhm.
And that it builds a momentum. So after an hour, I feel like I'm just total love. That's a
Yes.
nice little
Yes.
method.
Yeah.
Another method is, could I tune into that there's a world outside of words? Like,
Mm.
we're using words and we might describe what's out there as a tree, but it's not describing itself as a tree.
Mhm.
Babies experience a world without words. It's very direct perception of
Yes.
reality.
Yes.
And I'll say, let me just put the whole idea of labels and words on the shelf for 1 minute and experience the awe of wordlessness
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
quiet. That's very direct.
Yes. Yes.
So there's a lot of really simple ones. A friend of mine came back from India, and he told me he got a magical mantra for helping him feel overwhelming gratitude. So I
Okay.
asked what the mantra was, and he said, you gotta get it from the guru
Right. Of
directly.
course.
Well, I'll let people know what this mantra is. Okay. But first there's a little story attached. So I go into, have you been to India?
I have not.
It's a long way away.
Yeah.
And then, I took a rickshaw for 4 hours in 100-degree heat.
Mm.
I finally talked to this guru and I say, I want to know this magical mantra for feeling gratitude in all moments. And he says in his Indian accent, yes, my mantra is the most powerful mantra on earth. He leans in to whisper it to me. He says, whenever possible, repeat these words. The mantra I give you are the words, thank you. Well, I look at him like, oh, you gotta be joking. I say, that's it? And he looks at me and he says, no. That's it is the mantra you have been using. That makes you feel like you never have enough. My mantra is thank you, not that's it. That's it will take you nowhere.
Ah.
So I look at him, I go, well, thanks for nothing, because I'm pissed off.
Oh,
And he
yeah,
said,
you've just taken the rickshaw in 4 hours.
yeah, right. So he says, oh, thanks for nothing is not the mantra. You must say it from your heart many times a day. So when you eat good food, say thank you. And when you see your child or a sunset or your pet, say thank you. And soon you'll be filled with gratitude, and I tried it, and, I'll do that 10 times a day. I'm grateful that I get to speak to you over Zoom. This is amazing that we are
Yes.
talking instantly from across the planet.
Right.
Little things of feeling my heart saying thank you for my hands, thank you for this drink, thank you for this book, whatever. So I kind of focus on really simple methods that seem to be very powerful in creating an altered or higher state of consciousness.
Yeah. And the beauty of keeping it simple is that it doesn't engage our brilliant, well-educated, highly
Overly
complex, overused mentality.
Yeah. Especially in this culture.
Exactly. And so I think about that, about the thank you, even when, or especially when things aren't going well. And you get to if you say thank you, there is implied in that, okay, there's something for me to learn or something for me to look at. Okay, if the universe has my back, how in this moment?
Yeah. It allows you to learn from your life rather than think that the universe is making a mistake.
Right. And being a researcher in your own life, I would say you have been an incredible inner researcher. We don't know you well, obviously. I just met you. And that's something that really comes through, is that your willingness to be that inner researcher. I write about that. I speak about that, but it's something that is hard to really live from.
Yeah. Well, another story related to that is funny. I used to lead a group of like a spiritual movie group where
What does that mean?
I play for people movies that were profound,
Okay.
and then people would write about what they learned from it.
Uh-huh.
Well, one week I was going to show the movie Gandhi, but in the DVD sleeve was the movie Men in Black 2. And I wasn't going to be there, so I gave it to a friend to show to these 30
Yeah.
people.
Uh-huh.
And because they were so used to getting the profound message from every movie, when they saw Men in Black 2, which was a really bad movie, the Men in Black 1 and 3 were pretty good, but
Yeah.
Men in Black 2 got lambasted. But they're so used to finding something wonderful and profound that when they wrote about, they said, "Oh, this movie blew my mind. It was fantastic. I learned so much." So when you
Wow.
have the intention to learn from your life, no matter what,
Mhm.
then you learn. But if your intention really is to show how other people are at fault or the world's not fair, then that's what you get as well.
Yeah. And it can even be turned against oneself to say the way in which I'm not enough, the way in which I'm not okay.
Yeah, and that's sad when the whole wisdom of the universe and all the love of the universe is in a convenient location,
Mhm.
namely inside yourself.
Exactly. We were set up so beautifully.
Yes,
I mean,
it's the last place we look, of course.
exactly, but this is the blueprint, and this is what needs to this is what we need to learn how to operate, this
Mhm.
new operating system.
Yeah,
This
and
is
part of my mission is to get the best methods out there. I don't think people should really charge money necessarily for expensive retreats or things like that. So I tried to put all the greatest hits in the Enlightenment Project book.
mhm.
But even if people don't want to buy that, I put my 5 favorite quick ways to awaken to inner peace on my website, and people can get that for free.
Great.
And
What is your website? So that was going to be my next question, is how can people connect with you?
well, it's the enlightenmentproject.net.
Okay.
And they get a free ebook, a free audio meditation, and the first chapter of the book for free if they put in their email address.
Great. Okay. That's an easy way to start to move forward in a new way, perhaps.
Yeah, and find what works for you.
Find what works for you. That could be your big message.
My tagline.
Your tagline.
Actually,
Is
my
it?
tagline on the podcast is "Keep exploring."
Okay. Wait, but this is a perfect, that's a great intro to find what works for you.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Any other, I'm sure you could have hundreds, but is there a story you would like to share as a way of closing for the
Yeah.
audience?
One comes to mind as you asked that. Many years ago, I was in India again, and I was meeting up with went to the ashram of a guru named Punjaji, a famous guy. And when I got there, he immediately pointed to me and told me to sit in front of him, like right next to him.
Right.
And he gets up to me close and he says, "Who are you?" And I didn't know the protocol there. So I said, "I'm Jonathan Robinson from the United States." And he just started laughing hysterically. He thought that was the funniest thing. And then I thought, well, that was a wrong answer. But he said, "No, who are you really?"
Yeah.
And I said, "I'm a spiritual seeker." And he kind of shook his head no.
Right.
And then I said, "I'm an author." And he shook his head no. And I said, "I'm a man." And he shook his head no. And we did this for about 3 minutes. I ran out of roles finally.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then I looked in his eyes and, we talked about being in that wordless state where it was just him and me. And there was like light beams coming out of his eyes. And I just surrendered to that experience. And before I knew it, I was overwhelmed with like a wave of love and peace that was really more than I'd ever experienced before. And my body reacted by just sobbing. So I'm like sobbing in his lap, and he taps me on the head and he says, "This love and this peace you're feeling now, that's who you really are. And your job in life is to get back to that place."
Period.
I think that's all our jobs
Yes.
is
Yeah.
get back there. You know, we might think we're an accountant or a lawyer, but really we all are spiritual seekers hungering for our true nature.
Mm,
And when we tap into that, then we can bring our gifts back into the world in a way that really serves.
yeah. Then we can bring our gifts back into the world in a way that truly serves. And I would want to add that piece really to, it's not just about finding the love within. It's not just
Mhm.
about finding the peace within. It is about how we express the essence and the energy of who we are in the world.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you, Jonathan Robinson. You are certainly persistent.
Yeah. I'll take that. I'll agree with that part.
And I appreciate that about you.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Well, we all have different gifts. And, you know,
exactly.
if everybody really allows her gift out fully, I think the world is going to work a lot better.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, is that we don't have to think about being in service. We just have to express who we are, and that it will be our act of service.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. So
Thank you
thank
again
you
for being.
for doing your gift so I get a chance to talk to you. And I hope some of your listeners, you know, if something I said was useful, they research more.
I hope so too, because that is what it's about. That's why I do this,
Mhm.
is so that people can get exposed to different ways of seeing things and thinking about things, and
Mhm.
then take that into their lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to our listeners, thank you for being with us today at Wisdom Talk Radio. Join us here regularly for more wisdom, discovery, and illumination. Remember, you can find us on your favorite place to listen to podcasts. And if you've enjoyed listening today, please leave us a review, because that helps other people to access the wisdom that is here and to transform the world. And for more about deepening your connection with your inner guidance, take the Quantum Connection Style Quiz now.
Thanks for joining us here at Wisdom Talk Radio. We wish you well in your conscious explorations. For more information and to join in the conversation, our website is wisdomtalkradio.com or at Wisdom Talk Radio on Facebook.